A director once flipped a fully loaded 18-wheeler, smashed it into a train, and detonated it in a fireball so massive it lit the sky. All for one scene. No CGI, no miniatures, a real rig, destroyed on purpose. The film? Black Dog. The truck? A Peterbilt so beaten, bent, and tortured during production that stunt coordinators joked it died a hero. And the star behind the wheel wasn't a stunt double. It was Patrick Swayze, who earned a real Class A CDL so he could drive his own big rig stunts at highway speeds. This is what happens when Hollywood decides normal 18-wheelers aren't dangerous enough. Filmmakers turn them into battering rams, rolling fortresses, and weapons of pure chaos. Spinning drills, armored cabs, flamethrowers, harpoons, hydraulic claws, and rigs built specifically to crash, flip, or explode on command. Today we're breaking down 20 insane facts about weaponized trucks in movies, revealing why practical effects still dominate the most iconic action scenes ever filmed. From the Black Dog railroad collision that could only be done once, to the Mad Max rigs that influenced the Fast and Furious franchise, these machines weren't props. They were engineering marvels designed for destruction. Hit subscribe, because we're starting with the film that turned a CB radio rebellion into a cinematic legend. Sam Peckinpah's Convoy arrived in 1978 as a tribute to trucker culture at its absolute peak, and the production became as legendary as the film itself. The 1977 Mack RS712 LST served as Rubber Duck's primary truck in the story, though production actually filmed with a 1970 Mack RS700 for most scenes. 4 different trucks rotated throughout filming, each one taking punishment that would make modern insurance companies weep. The film was based on C.W. McCall's 1975 hit song of the same name, turning a 3-minute country novelty track into a full-length rebellion narrative. The budget tells its own story. Production started with a $6 million budget and finished at $12 million, running 11 days behind schedule. Where did that money go? Straight into truck destruction and one of cinema's most memorable explosion scenes. The famous bridge explosion was filmed in Needles, California, over the Colorado River. The bridge was removed shortly after filming and has since been completely demolished, making that footage a permanent record of a structure that no longer exists. Explosive charges were rigged to a 1960s 5,800-gallon Trailmobile tank trailer, and when it blew spectacularly. That silver-painted duck hood ornament became iconic, but it started as chrome. The problem? Sun reflections interfered with filming, bouncing light directly into camera lenses and ruining shots. The crew sanded it down and painted it silver, then added a mohawk for attitude, according to the prop master. This wasn't a boardroom decision. This was a practical solution that became a defining visual element. Behind the scenes, Peckinpah was battling alcoholism and drug addiction during production, which partially explains the budget overruns and scheduling chaos. The film was shot during the CB radio craze, released the same year as Smokey and the Bandit, catching lightning in a bottle when trucker culture dominated American highways. One original truck and trailer survive today, also owned by Anthony Fox, the same collector who preserved the Smokey and the Bandit Kenworth. The mile-long convoy in the film's climax became a symbol of working-class rebellion, showing that unified action could challenge authority. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't meant to be. Peckinpah created a rolling middle finger to establishment power, and audiences loved every minute of it. Patrick Swayze earning a real Class A CDL at truck driving school for Black Dog wasn't a publicity stunt. He actually went through the training, learned to handle an 18-wheeler, and insisted on doing his own driving for many scenes. He chose an older Peterbilt 379 over a brand-new truck specifically to not draw attention, which fit his character's profile as an ex-con trying to stay under the radar. The script mentioned an Eaton-Fuller 10-speed transmission, though filming showed a 9-speed in certain shots, a continuity error only actual truckers would catch. The film had a $30 million budget for what was essentially a B-movie trucker action thriller, showing that studios still believed in the genre's commercial potential in 1998. The project was originally written for Kevin Sorbo, who was set for a $3 million payday before departing the production. Swayze took the role in November 1997, bringing legitimate star power to what could have been a straight-to-video release. Randy Travis and Meatloaf signed on as co-stars, both country and rock musicians, adding musical credibility to a film about highway culture. Meatloaf played Red, a Bible-quoting psychotic villain who spent the entire film chasing Swayze's character across multiple states. The plot centered on an ex-con trucker, manipulated into transporting $3 million worth of illegal guns, with Red's crew attempting multiple highway hijacks. The action escalated with each encounter, building to increasingly destructive confrontations. In one memorable scene, Swayze poured gunpowder directly into a bullet wound and lit it on fire to cauterize the injury on screen, a moment so brutal it became the film's signature image. The climactic truck battle delivered everything the genre promised. Red's rig flipped repeatedly in a choreographed destruction sequence before being hit by a train and exploding in a massive fireball. Director Kevin Hooks, who previously directed Passenger 57, orchestrated exceptional practical stunt work that put real drivers in real danger. The film earned a brutal 15% Rotten Tomatoes score from critics who dismissed it as derivative and formulaic, but it gained cult status among action fans who appreciated its commitment to practical effects. Black Dog is now recognized as one of the last action road movies using all practical effects before CGI began dominating the genre. It marked the end of an era for trucker action films, closing out a decades-long tradition that began with Smokey and the Bandit and evolved through Convoy and beyond. The film didn't innovate. It perfected what came before, delivering one final love letter to an era that was already disappearing in the rearview mirror. The Dominican Republic opening of Fast and Furious 4 brought the franchise back to its roots while escalating the vehicular mayhem to new extremes. The crew's gas tanker hijacking operation showed criminal efficiency that bordered on military precision. Dom and Han driving in reverse at over 100 miles per hour while executing a moving hijack wasn't just visually impressive. It required months of stunt coordination and practice runs to pull off safely. The tanker unhooking and reconnecting to different tow trucks mid-chase introduced a level of complexity that previous films hadn't attempted. A cannon was used to roll the tanker truck for practical effect, rather than relying on CGI, continuing the franchise's commitment to real stunts whenever possible. Letty jumping from vehicle to vehicle Spider-Man style while the convoy moved at highway speeds put stunt performers in genuine danger, creating tension that audiences could feel viscerally. When the driver abandoned the truck and let it roll toward Dom, the sequence became a game of chicken played at lethal speeds. Dom's solution was to drive his car completely underneath the rolling tanker at the last possible second, threading a needle at 80 miles per hour with zero margin for error. The practical stunt work over CGI maintained the series' credibility with car enthusiasts who could tell the difference between real and fake. The Kenworth W900 prototype in Furiosa represents evolution beyond the war rig's defensive philosophy into pure offensive capability. 615 horsepower and 2,050 pound-feet of torque provided the raw power needed to operate its signature weapon system. That large spinning drill with 4 maces attached, the Bommy Knocker, became the vehicle's defining feature, a weapon so brutal it could destroy pursuing vehicles in seconds. 2 excavators mounted on the frame provided additional attack capability, allowing the rig to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Dual V8 engines with independent starting systems meant that if one engine failed or was damaged, the second could engage immediately to maintain power. This redundancy was critical for survival in the wasteland, where mechanical failure meant death. The bas relief depicting Immortan Joe leading war boys wasn't decoration. It was propaganda, marking the vehicle's allegiance and purpose. Built from salvaged older vehicles in the House of Holy Motors inside the Citadel, the rig represented the wasteland's entire industrial philosophy. Nothing wasted, everything repurposed, innovation born from scarcity. A special war pup stood guard above the Bommy Knocker weapon, a human component integrated into the machine's offensive systems. The rig was attacked by Octobos and his Mortifliers on its maiden voyage, testing its systems in actual combat before it could even complete its first mission. Eventually upgraded with a second tanker after the Gastown run, the rig evolved throughout the film, adapting to new threats and mission requirements. It represents the evolution from the war rig's defensive design to a fully offensive weapon platform, showing how necessity and warfare drive technological innovation even in post-apocalyptic conditions. The Bommy Knocker itself became iconic, a weapon so unique and visually striking that it stands alongside the war rig's design as one of cinema's most memorable vehicular weapons. This is officially the most heavily weaponized truck in cinema history, not just in terms of weapon count, but in how completely the vehicle was reimagined as a weapon system rather than a transport platform. Every element serves combat effectiveness, from the dual engines to the excavator arms to the spinning drill that gave it its name. Rusty Nail's black 1985 Peterbilt 359EX HD became cinema's most terrifying truck not through weapons or armor, but through pure psychological horror. The entire Joyride trilogy used Peterbilt 359 models, a 1985 in the first film, 1984 in the second, and 1976 in the third, maintaining visual consistency while the character's brutality escalated with each installment. The voice was provided by Ted Levine, who horror fans immediately recognized as Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, bringing that same unsettling menace to a character who never appears on screen. The driver's identity was never revealed throughout the franchise. Only his voice was heard through CB radio, making him an invisible hunter stalking his victims across America's highways. The film was co-written by J.J. Abrams with a $20 million budget, a significant investment that showed studios still believed in vehicular horror. Critics compared it to Spielberg's Duel, but Joyride took a completely original approach by making the villain's invisibility central to the terror, rather than incidental to it. Rusty Nail's violence escalated throughout the film in ways that pushed R-rating boundaries. He ripped a businessman's lower jaw completely off in a scene that made audiences gasp. He crashed through an ice truck to reach his targets, then slowly crushed a car against a tree, taking his time to maximize their fear. The motel climax featured the truck rolling downhill unmanned, crashing into the building in a destruction sequence that required elaborate rigging and timing. A booby trap rigged with a shotgun connected to the door via string showed tactical thinking beyond simple rage. The reveal that the dead ice truck driver was planted in Rusty's seat while the actual killer escaped on a CB radio hidden in an ambulance proved he was always 3 steps ahead. The sequels showed increasing brutality, jaw removal with chains, finger amputations, impalements, each film pushing further into torture territory. The trilogy established a pattern. The truck always gets destroyed, but Rusty always survives, ready to hunt again. Joyride became the template for the invisible villain trope in vehicular horror, proving that psychological terror could surpass visual horror when executed properly. The truck itself was just a tool, but in Rusty Nail's hands, it became an instrument of calculated vengeance that made every CB radio conversation a potential death sentence. The film's influence extended beyond cinema into video games and novels that copied its formula of an unseen trucker hunting victims across isolated highways. From bootlegging runs to nuclear war convoys, weaponized big rigs evolved alongside the stakes of their stories. The 1970s celebrated trucker culture and rebellion with Smokey and the Bandit and Convoy, turning truckers into folk heroes fighting against corrupt authority. These films portrayed trucks as symbols of freedom and working-class solidarity, vehicles that represented independence on America's open roads. The 1980s introduced post-apocalyptic warfare aesthetics with the Road Warrior, reimagining trucks as survival tools in a world where civilization had collapsed. The tanker became more valuable than human life, a resource worth killing and dying for in a desert wasteland. The shift from celebration to desperation reflected cultural anxieties about resource scarcity and societal collapse. The 1990s brought guns and direct action to highway warfare with Black Dog, showing truckers as combatants in criminal enterprises rather than rebels or survivors. The romantic outlaw image gave way to grittier portrayals of the trucking industry's darker side, where big rigs transported illegal cargo and drivers fought running battles with law enforcement and rival criminals. The 2000s split into 2 distinct paths. Fast and Furious transformed big rigs into heist targets and obstacles, treating them as moving vaults to be cracked open at speed. Joyride took the opposite approach, using the truck as a horror element, an unstoppable force piloted by an invisible psychopath. Both approaches recognized the truck's symbolic power while applying it to completely different genres. The 2010s and 2020s brought full weaponization with Fury Road and Furiosa, creating trucks that existed purely for combat. These weren't transport vehicles pressed into military service. They were war machines designed from the ground up to fight and survive in sustained warfare. The evolution was complete, from symbol to tool to weapon, each generation pushing further toward pure militarization. The pattern across all these films remains consistent. Start with a working truck that audiences recognize, Add personality through customization, paint schemes, or operational style. Then add weapons, armor, or capabilities that transform it into something beyond civilian utility. Practical effects consistently trump CGI for lasting impact on audiences who can instinctively tell the difference between real and fake destruction. Real crashes and real explosions create genuine tension that computer-generated imagery struggles to replicate. Trucks become characters with distinct personalities defined by their appearance, sound, and how they move through space. The size difference between trucks and cars creates natural David versus Goliath drama that audiences understand immediately without exposition. This formula has remained remarkably consistent across 5 decades of filmmaking because it works on a fundamental, primal level.